And that was the first time that I actually heard of the terminology environmental justice. That was the first time that I was able to start making these connections of why is it that a lot of my family members have asthma, where we're experiencing a drought like we've never seen before.
And I think that's one of the main elements that we need to work. It's empowering our community.
If we don't do the work in our own circles, in our own families, in our own neighborhoods, at our own schools, at our own workplaces, on the public bus, at the dinner table, we need to have those conversations first.
This conversation is incredibly important and timely as our nation continues to grapple with the pervasive systemic racism, including in our environmental, energy, and healthcare systems.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Green Table Talk, an intergenerational conversation exploring all things environmental justice from the Black and Brown perspective. My name is Wawa, and I am one of the hosts here today. I am just so excited for this conversation and for our esteemed guests here today, who will be introducing themselves very, very soon. But before we get to that, I'm going to pass it along to my other co-host, Karina, for today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Karina Martinez, Chief Communications Officer with Corazon Latino, and I'm so happy to be celebrating Black History Month together through this podcast and also offline.
Hey, everyone. I'm Jolie Abreu, and I work with Corazon Latino. I'm a digital strategist, as well as I run a small boutique company, HypeHer Digital, doing digital media marketing and social media strategies, as well as being an educator here in the District of Columbia. And I'm super excited to be a part of the Green Table Talks for this episode, and I can't wait to get into our questions.
Amazing, amazing. We are so excited to have you. I did a little deep dive online too, a little internet stalking, and you're just incredible. And yeah, we're really, really excited to have you here. So I'm going to be starting off our questions. So as everyone here knows, or I hope knows, over 1.5 million Africans were kidnapped and stolen by Europeans that then arrived and colonized Spanish-speaking countries, including Mexico, Central and South America, and the Caribbean between 1520 and 1867. Many of the Africans that came brought skills and trades that were heavily concentrated in agriculture and other roles as stewards of the land. Jolie, as a person of Afro-Latinx descent, how do you work to maintain the legacy of your ancestral connection to the land and Mother Earth?
Oh, that's a really good question, because honestly, I think the older I get, the more I realize how important that connection to the earth, how important it is to my life and how much it means to me. And just to give you a little example or a little anecdote, I started kind of getting more into nature through Corazon Latino and the work I do with Corazon Latino, because of course it brings me outdoors and it makes me excited, and it kind of just goes to show how much like being outdoors and spending time outdoors kind of makes you care so much more about our planet and Madre Tierra, because you realize how amazing it is and how many beautiful things we have on this planet that we should take care of because we want other people to enjoy. And so this summer, I actually went on a 6-week journey, and I visited over 17 national and state parks. And I can't tell you how exciting and how excited I was to just kind of take in all this land and also be able to explore and experience. And I'm going to go ahead and just say that I'm not an outdoors person whatsoever. Like before, I would be like glamping and things like that. And after this journey, I just felt so connected. And my grandmother had passed away last year, and she was very big into nature. Like she was an herbalist, and in Dominican Republic, they would call her like La Bruja. It's kind of like a terminology for somebody who uses a lot of nature to heal and a lot of nature to be a part of. It's just a part of her, who she was. Like she will say, you know, if you have a headache, hey, take a tea of this, you know, if you have any kind of ailment, she would have a plan for it. And so for me, I always thought she was just a little bit cuckoo because like, you know, I'm like, this is not going to help me at all. Like I need medication. And she kind of instilled that in me. And I feel like after her passing and having taken this trip in the summer, and kind of just taking time to be in that space, something in me activated, and I had just, I started to remember and recall so many of the things that she would teach me. And all the plants that I would see, I would notice them. And now I can't even step outside without going outside and be like, oh, look at this cute leaf, or look at this, look at the colors changing. And I kind of try to honor that connection by just being more aware and learning more about it. But also, I really want to honor that connection by helping to take care of the earth, and being able, as an educator and as a person who works in a field where I share and I'm able to access so much information, my connection to Madre Tierra really, I think it has developed so much more in the past year. But also I feel like I have like a duty to now pass that information on, but also to be able to keep our lands how they are, and also to take care of them, because our future generation are going to have less and less of these access if we don't do something about it. So it was a very long-winded story. So I'm sorry about that.
Jolie, you brought up some great points about legacy, your ancestry, and also your cultural background a little bit by touching on the Dominican Republican side. I want to talk a little bit about like anti-Blackness. Anti-Blackness has been a trending topic per se, but it's been a gruesome social construct for centuries. And for example, with the Latinx and Black community, Afro-Latinos as well, in the history of Afro-Peruvians, like many South American countries, it dates back to when the first Africans arrived, when the conquistadors in 1521 kind of took over. And so Black slaves were forced to travel to Peru. They were forced to travel, and they were called different types of names. They were referred to, and they were divided by these different categories that they gave them, and they were derogatory terms. They were either negro bozales for those born in Africa, and negros ladinos for Afro-Peruvians who assimilated with Spanish culture. And you'll even see a lot of these terms in timepieces if you're watching telenovelas. I watched a few myself where they refer to the Ladinos, or they refer to the other African characters in the show, but this isn't a show. It still continues today. How do you navigate the painful phenomenon in the Latinx community, and why what type of work is involved to dismantle anti-Blackness, and why is it so important for the environmental justice movement?
I think, well, this is definitely a topic that's going on right now. As an educator, I actually teach Spanish. So in my Spanish class, I try to incorporate a lot about Black history, and in every single month, actually, like I tried to make it a point to incorporate the topic and also the conversation, because I feel like when someone, and this happens in the Latino community as well, all the time. It's happened in my own family. Like in my family, you have every single shade of skin color, and someone might even say like, oh, yo no soy negro, I'm not Black. And I feel like because education plays such a massive role in this, it's important for us, especially now in this time and age, to be able to educate either our children, our family members, every single person that you're around, in terms of what the term means, and in terms of how we look at each other and how we look at others as well. And I think that this is a topic that we've actually been discussing in my classroom, in terms of Afro-Latino and our history and our culture, and how we have similarities and how the differences actually portray here, actually in the United States. So for me, I feel that in the environmental space, that's very important too, because I think that when we're communicating to the community or sharing to the community in terms of the resources and the availability that these resources have, I think that for us, there's such a lack. And I think that we can't obviously put Latinos into, we're not a monolith, but at the same time, we can't separate each of these cultures and communities based on skin color either. And I think that's something that we do in the community. And the answer to that is definitely education. I think that educating every single person you know, and calling people out when they're wrong or when they say something that's not accurate, is very important. And for me, I kind of like have those aha moments, or just feel so proud when I hear students just kind of like correcting themselves and saying things that are not appropriate or that are not accurate. in terms of the hate and the racism, the colorism that happens within our own communities as well. I think that's just, for me, that's the major piece. I think the major piece is definitely education and definitely being able to understand that our cultures are different, but there are also so many similarities that we have, and there's no room for hate. There's no room for colorism. There's just no room.
Yeah, we're so proud to have you working with our environmental justice groups as well. I know that you're a strong contributor and your leadership is really valued in this space as well. But also, you know, exactly what you just mentioned and what you teach your students, that's what we need to see more of in these spaces as well. And we know right now that environmental orgs are just like way too white, and there are a host of Afro-Latinx environmental justice warriors who don't get the credit that they deserve and that they should get. Do you teach your students about any of these leaders, or who are some of the most inspirational environmentalists that you know of and their contributions?
So one of the environmentalists that I mean, this is also because I also saw her, so don't judge me. I really love the work that Green Girl Leah does, and I know that definitely is probably one of the more well-known environmentalists in terms of sharing information and content and things like that. But I think that because social media plays such a massive role in how our community gets the information, I think that that's probably one of the things, and that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about social media and digital media, because I feel like our community lacks in that field as well. And there's so many people who have access to a phone, who have access to a computer, have access to social media, but they're not getting the information that they should be getting, because so many of the people who are doing the work are not sharing what they're doing. And so that's why whenever I get behind an organization or something, I try to share as much as possible with whoever wants to listen or whoever will listen, or I'm just going to force everybody to listen. But so honestly, I feel like we don't have enough of that in the community, and I would love to learn more about it. So just being honest, I definitely, the people who I know in the environmental field are probably in the Black Millennials for Flint organization, and probably Green Girl Leah, or anyone that I've known from Corazon Latino. There's a lot to mention, but I don't think that we share enough of the information, or we don't get enough recognition or press or involvement in these larger organizations, because they are very white-led. So yeah.
For sure. I completely agree with you. I think that social media and like using our creative devices is such an important way to connect with people, especially young people. If that's where a lot of youth are, right? If we're trying to educate our youth and even facilitate tough conversations like the ones that we're having right now, reaching them where they're at is so important. So I think those points are really, really important, especially in the environmental space, where the environmental space like is predominantly white, and it also scales a bit older. Like when we think about the conventional leaders in the environmental space, a lot of them are like older white folks that came from a lot of wealth and like really follow that path of like environmentalism in the past being this thing that was for and run by like white elite. And it's definitely an issue that still exists and definitely contributes to why some things aren't translated as well as they should be online, and why a lot of people like you just named, like Black Millennials for Flint, Leah Thomas, and a ton of like new crop of like young like influencers and people that know how to use social media have had to come up and kind of take the reins in the environmental education space, which is really, really important. But let me switch topics a little bit. So I'm a person that's also bicultural in a way, right? I'm Kenyan, my family's from Kenya. My parents are immigrants from Kenya, and I have grown up in between like two cultures, growing up in a very traditional Kenyan household, while also coming to terms with what it means to be an American that didn't necessarily grow up with parents that were American and had to struggle to get their papers and things of that sort. So I'm curious a little bit, Jolie, you are also like bicultural, or in a sense like tricultural. So I wonder how that perspective has allowed you to be a better advocate for different people and having an intersectional lens, because I think sometimes a lot of the conversations about being bicultural or tricultural, it's overwhelmingly something that we talk about as being like this negative thing that made things really difficult. And like, yes, it does complicate things, but also I'd argue it provides like a certain type of intrinsic nuance to different things and gives us a different perspective that sometimes people may take for granted. So I'd love to hear a bit about your perspective on that.
So my family is also, I'm first generation, I guess, to everything basically. In my family. So I was the first person to go to college, the first person to do a lot. I did too many to mention, but I definitely, and my mom and my father both came here from Dominican Republic. My mom was a housekeeper growing up and a custodian, and she kind of worked in a lot of the schools where I went to. So that was kind of interesting because I always had to behave very well. I would get in trouble all the time. And my dad used to be in Spanish, I guess you call it a bodeguero, which is like a person who has like a corner store, and it's a very New York Dominican kind of path, a career path. So that's the entrepreneurial side, but definitely navigating as a person who has so many different cultures, who's involved with so many different cultures. I think that for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that it made it harder. I feel like, in a sense, I've always kind of felt like I didn't have a place to necessarily fit in, you know, because if you're in a community with, like, let's say, if you're in a community where everyone's Black, or everyone's just like white presenting Latino, or any kind of community, or just if you're just with people who are just white, and I feel like I kind of never really fit into a specific hole or peg, as you say. And it kind of just, eventually I kind of just evolved into having these lens where I would just be a chameleon and kind of go into whatever space I could and just be who I am, naturally, like who I am. And I always try to show up authentically as myself, and share my culture with whoever wants to listen, or whoever's there, just being me. I necessarily don't feel like it's a bad thing. I think it's just a perspective and a mindset. And I think that as a person who has so many experiences and has a different lens than other people, it is my responsibility to share that. And it is my responsibility to be able to be a spokesperson for my community in whatever way that I can. And also to help break stereotypes too, you know? And that's the biggest thing. I really appreciate being able to be an educator. And one of the reasons why I always struggle to leave the education field is because I always feel like a lot of my students are not going to ever see another person like me in many ways, in terms of like what I can share with them, what kind of knowledge I can impart, the information. Because let's be honest, if you're following curriculums, they don't necessarily touch on any of these things that are real world problems that our community and our children are dealing with every single day, especially, and I've generally worked at schools where students are majority Black or Latino students. So for them to see an educator that is Latina, Afro-Latina, that is involved with so many different organizations, so many different aspects of our community, it's hard for them. And I feel like it's my responsibility to be able to share that and impart that knowledge. And whenever I meet people who have or having a tough time to be able to fit in, I say, why would you want to fit in? Like, what's the purpose of fitting in? I think standing out is better, and being able to use that to your advantage is going to be better for you. So I feel like I don't ever want to fit into anything ever. So.
Take a moment, let us sit in, y'all. You know, I think that was such a perfect, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think you put it so perfectly. And really encapsulated the chameleon effect that I think a lot of people can relate to.
Not to cut you off, but going back to the hair thing, the hair makes such a massive difference. Because I had somebody today be like, oh my God, where are you from? I was in the Uber. She's like, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm Dominican. I mean, I always say I'm Dominican. I was born in New York, but I'm Dominican. So she was like, where are you from? And I was like, I'm Dominican. And she's like, oh, wow, I thought you were Middle Eastern or something. And every time that I like, the hair makes such a massive difference. So I feel like for me, being a part of any community or any culture, I feel like my hair is probably going to be like my superpower. Yeah.
That is so funny. Well, before you were talking about stereotypes, right? And I think that in general, because of colonization and extreme nationalism, right? People, especially in the US, don't really understand Afro-Latinidad, right? For example, like in preparation for this conversation, Leticia had mentioned that someone had posted the following statement on the Black Millennials for Flint's Facebook page. They said, sorry, Alexa just turned off the lights. Alexa, lights on. Okay, I'll start that over. So in general, because of colonization and extreme nationalism, people in the US tend not to really understand Afro-Latinidad. For example, in preparation for this conversation, Leticia had sent over a comment that someone had made on the Black Millennials for Flint's Facebook page. And they said, Latinx is a pan-ethnicity, Afro is an ethnicity, Afro-Latinx is an oxymoron. And there was a response from a beautiful sister who is from African descent, and they clapped back and said, regardless, Black people can describe themselves however they want, trying to act like they are using the wrong terms for themselves, using English, first of all, is a debate nobody's trying to have. And it was a huge, heated debate on Facebook. So Jolie, as a person of Afro-Latinx descent, how would you approach this conversation and just like the general misunderstanding? I think like even I'm not of Latinx descent, but I have a lot of Afro-Latina girlfriends and who are proudly Black women that are also Afro-Latina. And people will question how they aren't just Black, and like they're trying to explain the fact that being Afro-Latina is something that is who they are, that they can be both Black and Latina, and that's a part of who they are. And people will question why they're speaking Spanish and trying to seem different, when in reality it's just them being who they are and being where they're from. And a lot of this is from a lack of education. People aren't being educated that, that there are Black people that are Afro-Latina, and that, being Latinx comes in a range of different shades, as you were talking about before. So how would you contribute to this conversation? What have you seen in regards to the landscape of this conversation? And what would you tell people that remain confused?
I would say, first of all, this is also a conversation that we have in class, because like, I guess everyone identifies differently, I think it depends. For me, the reason, I feel like my family is from Dominican Republic. You have a mix of Taino Indians, you have a mix of slaves who were forced to come over. And there's so many combinations of skin colors, hair types, and everything in my family, ranging from blonde hair, blue eyes, all the way to black skin, and their hair texture is going to be the hair texture that's going to be more coarse and thicker. My hair is definitely thick and very curly and tight, but I can also go to a Dominican hair salon and straighten it out and whatever may have you, and do whatever hair treatments. But for me, I feel like having this conversation with students too, in terms of like, oh, but Hispanics or Latinos look like this, because this is what they've seen, or they don't understand and they don't know that slaves were not just only brought to the United States. They were also the slave trade incorporated many stops. so much so that so much of the world has communities that are of African descent. And going back to honoring your ancestors, for me, I think it's important to remember where you came from. Even if you didn't come from there this generation, you still have to continue to honor that, because if you don't know where you came from, how do you know where you're going? And I think that it's important for people to kind of understand that it's not their business to put a label on anyone, regardless of whether it's academic or however it is that you see it. I think that as a culture, being Afro-Latinx or Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina, however you identify, that's your choice. Just like if you're identifying as she, her, or him, he, it doesn't matter how you identify. I think that what matters is how you feel about it. And of course, there's definitely certain quantifications or qualifications. I would say definitely you have to have African descent. And so for many of us in the Caribbean, even though we try to deny it, even though we try to deny it or try to mask that, because of course, being white and having white features, having the white, the privilege that comes with being white, I feel like that's something in the community that we try to kind of mask. Even in my own family, I've had to, because I've always been the person in my family who's been outspoken, who will say whatever I need to say to correct you, because if you're wrong, you're wrong, and I'm not going to let you be disrespectful. And so even in our own community, we have this colorism and this hate in terms of the terminology and trying to classify it as, oh no, you're just Latino, or you're just African, or you're just whatever it is that you just are. But nobody is just anything. No one is just one thing. Like, we have a melting pot of different ethnicities and cultures and skin colors, and there's so much beautiful diversity. And I feel like it's more important to focus on how to celebrate that diversity, how to honor that culture, and how to share the beautifulness, and instead stop trying to mask and be something that you're not. And so I feel like always being able to show up as yourself and be authentic and share the beautiful things that are a part of your culture, and understand the things that are ugly so that you can fix it and move forward, but you definitely need to know your history. And so for me, I would say that those people are wrong in trying to instill their opinion or trying to divide community, as opposed to trying to bring everybody together. That's how I feel.
Jolie, I can relate to so many of those experiences as well. And in my family, we have a huge variation too of what people's phenotypes come out to be. Like in some of my family members, you can definitely see some of the features of the Black ancestry that we have. And it's really cool to see that like different combinations. But I love what you said about this in general. Like, you gave us a really great motto to really stand on. It's not your business labeling anyone. So let's take that into consideration. Love that tip. What else can you share with us? What's your last word or call to action for those who may be watching tonight as we're celebrating Black History Month? And, we have so much going on, and we need these words of wisdom right now.
I would say that Black is beautiful, brown is beautiful. I think that I'm going to end it on the note of like, there are so many beautiful aspects about our culture, and you see it comes out in so many different ways. If you look at pop culture, if you look at social media, if you look at even the standards of beauty, there's so many things that are influenced by the culture and by Black culture, by brown culture, but yet we don't want to embrace it. And it happens everywhere. And so for me, I feel like my message would be to embrace that, to share it, to learn about your history, and Karina, you were mentioning earlier in terms of your ancestry. I've done the ancestry, and for me, a lot of my family in terms of ancestors and DNA definitely comes from the Benin Togo area. So for me, I feel like knowing that information and knowing where you come from, even if it's not necessarily one generation or two generations before, I feel it's important to know your ancestors, to know your history, because again, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from, and you have to acknowledge the ugly and also celebrate the good, because there's so much to celebrate. And I feel like for Black history, in terms of being Afro-Latino or Afro-Latina or Afro-Latinx, however you identify, I think it's important for us to celebrate that and to share it and to embrace the culture and not to try to whitewash it in a sense. So I would say Black is beautiful, brown is beautiful, celebrate it, share it.
Well, happy Black History Month, everyone.
Yeah.
Black is beautiful, brown is beautiful.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode. Please let us know what you thought. I think that this is such a beautiful, especially such a beautiful ending. And we're also thankful to have just gotten all this beautiful insight from everyone. And I really hope that you share this video, share it with your friends, your family, colleagues, anyone that you think would benefit from getting this additional nuance and just having such meaningful conversations this Black History Month. So sending lots of love to everyone. And yeah, thank you for tuning in and stay tuned for our next episode coming out soon.